we're going to talk about unemployment. Now with unemployment, you've probably heard about the unemployment rate has gone down, but you might not realize that the unemployment rate often goes down when the economy is in worse shape. So politicians will say, look how great it is, the unemployment rate's down, and actually it means that it really means people got tired of looking for work. So there's other measures that you might not have heard about. So let's talk about what it means to be employed, what it means to be unemployed, how the government considers you unemployed, because remember, politicians want the narrowest measure possible of unemployed because they don't want to look bad, right? Unemployment makes a politician look bad. So they're going to have the narrowest possible definition of unemployment. So we're going to look at what those legal terms are, and you're going to learn a whole bunch in a rather short video. Okay? So let's take a look at the entire population. Okay? So this is the population itself. This is the entire population of a country. So this square is. And some of them are working. So let's just say working. Or I guess I can just label them, because I want to use this outer control. Okay, let's just call these people working. And let's call a thin sliver here looking for work. Okay, and let's call another thin sliver institutionalized. Or under 16. So sometimes it's worded 15 and under in textbooks. But basically, under 16. So if you're too young to work, we're not going to count you. Institutionalized means what? You're in jail, you're in the hospital, right? We're going to say you're institutionalized if you are in the military. Okay? Because we are not going to want to put you in the out of work statistics. Okay? So basically, you're not unemployed if you're in the military. You're not really considered working. You're just considered in an institution. You're somewhere not in. We're not going to count you. Okay? Okay. Now, this part we're going to call just not in the labor force. And people who are working or want to work, looking for work, that's the labor force. So it's from here to here, and that includes people that are looking for work. And the reason is, we don't want to count people who decide they're not going to work. When you retire, you're not the labor force, right? Or if you decide, I'm going to write the great American novel. I'm going to take my savings, I'm going to go sit on the beach, and I'm going to type. Actually, that'd be a terrible place to take your laptop. But you get the idea, right? I'm going to go sit in a cabin somewhere, and I'm going to type, and I'm going to write the great American novel. Not in the labor force. Okay? I decided I'm not going to ever work. When I was 13 years old, I decided I'm never going to work a day in my life because it just doesn't look fun. So I'm never going to work. I'm going to figure out ways not to have to work. Not in the labor force. Okay? A person decides to stay home with the child while the significant other works. Not in the labor force. We're not going to count someone as unemployed if they don't want to be employed because they're not unhappy, right? And unemployment is a measure of unhappiness at not working. So, how do we determine if you're looking for work? Well, the government actually says that you have to have been looking for a job in the last 4 weeks. The last 4 weeks. Okay? Looking for work in the last, that, my hand jerked and that did not work. The last 4 weeks. Okay? So if you haven't looked in 5 weeks, then we're going to assume you're really not that enthused about working and you're not in the labor force. Now I'm going to tell you a story about my brother-in-law. Now, his story ends well. Sort of. He's not working right now, but he's older. And he's so close to retirement, he's just not looking for a job again. But when he was young, he majored in, well, my sister majored in chemical engineering at Rolla, Missouri, University of Missouri Rolla, which has been renamed something about Missouri Institute of Technology or something. One of the best engineering programs in the country. So she majored in chemical engineering, and he technically had a major in aerospace engineering, but really he majored in dating my sister. And he had a grade point so low they made him stay an extra semester to bring his grade point up so he could graduate. So he had trouble finding a job. There was only, they moved to St. Louis from Rolla, Missouri, and she got a job right away, and he didn't. There is an aerospace company in St. Louis, but once you've been turned down there, where do you go to look for a job? And my sister, Darla, said, Doug, I really don't want you to just sit around home and just waste away. I know you're unhappy, you don't have a job, but every day just go out, get dressed, and go apply for a job. And so Doug had to get up and get dressed and go out and apply for a job. But Well, let me tell you a story. St. Louis has this wonderful zoo where you don't have to pay. And almost no zoo is like that. Almost all the zoos in the country, you have to pay to go. And so you feel like you have to stay for the whole thing, right? And your feet hurt, and it's like, oh, but we paid this money, we better see everything. Whereas the nice thing about St. Louis Zoo is you can drop in and see the elephants, and then you can leave, and some other time come back and see the penguins. So we were at the zoo and visiting. We didn't live in St. Louis, but we were visiting my sister. And Doug was telling me about some baby animal there that had been born. And it was a baby prairie dog. That's what it was, a prairie dog. Baby prairie dog. See that little one? That baby prairie dog was just born last week or something, and its name is... And I just turned around and I said, Doug, how do you know so much about every animal at the zoo? And he turned around and he said, well, don't tell Darla, but I just got so sick of looking for a job. I mean, I just keep getting rejected and rejected and rejected. He said, so I've been putting on my coat and my trench coat, my suit and my trench coat and my briefcase and coming to the zoo every day. So I've been telling the story for a while. What happened there? Doug couldn't find a job. He was looking for work, but at some point he stopped looking for a job and he went to the zoo, right? Well, the government doesn't call it going to the zoo, but it's a good metaphor for you stop being in the labor force. You give up. And when we measure unemployment, we measure the rate, the percentage of those looking for work out of the entire labor force. And I'll write that down in a minute, okay? So when people start going to the zoo because they give up, because the economy's so bad, the proportion of people looking for work gets smaller out of that amount of people in the labor force. And there's more people at the zoo learning the names of prairie dog babies. And those people at the zoo, those not in the labor force, they're not being counted. Well, they're being counted in other ways, but they're not being counted in the unemployment rate. So the unemployment rate gets better the longer people are unemployed. So if you have a really, really stinky economy and it goes on for years and years and years, you'll find that over time the unemployment rate gets better. And the politicians are going, oh yeah, the economy's booming. See, unemployment rate's getting better and better and better. Like, you need to be smarter than that. And that's why they make you take an economics class. There are other measures other than the unemployment rate. Okay? And Doug, by the way, eventually went back and got his master's degree in some form of computer science. Straight A's. Made multiple six-figure salary for 30-something years. Close to 30-something years. Working for a company in Detroit. And when they closed the branch in St. Louis, he said, no, I'm not moving to Detroit. Nobody in their right mind would move to Detroit. And they said, but Doug, we can't lose you. And they let him work from home for 5 years before they finally let him go 2 years ago. With 2 years worth of benefits. So he hasn't gone back to work yet because he's still on the benefits you get for when they let you go. So, and he's really close to getting unemployment, not unemployment, Social Security, excuse me, Social Security. So he hasn't decided what he's going to do, but he has had a good life. Everything turned out fine, and he's made plenty of money after he went back to school and got a master's. But for a short while, he spent a lot of time at the zoo. So let me get this erased, and then I will talk about, or maybe I've got room over here. Let me erase some of it. Okay, so the entire population, that's still there as the entire population. But this here, the unemployment rate, is equal to the number looking for work divided by, now that's looking for work in the last 4 weeks, but I'm not going to write that out, okay? Divided by the labor force. Okay? So if you've gone to the zoo, you're not in the labor force. Okay, so you can see why when you get discouraged. Oh, by the way, the people that go to the zoo, they're called discouraged workers. I just about said it and realized I hadn't defined it. Okay, so discouraged workers leave the workforce, go to the zoo, and they leave and they become not in the labor force. So